I'm going to put this on auto speak because it's a long question.
Dear Lisa, I went to a Zen monastery when I was 17. I'm now 43. Much of the time in between I have struggled, bouncing between the monastery and the pub. Nearly 4 years ago I ended up in hospital from drug and alcohol withdrawal. Since then I've been sober and exploring other options related to the self such as counseling and AA. However, non-duality keeps on reappearing. I think I'm done with Zen and the monastery lovely as it was. When I was at school my art teacher was a converted Vita teacher during classes. So, I've actually been interested in this since I was around 12 or 13 years old and it is firmly ingrained in my bones. I'm crap at being spiritual. I don't like that I am a slow learner. I feel optimistic, but if certain conditions are not met, I may miss my chance. I can't do it on my own it seems, but I struggle with trust. Note on booking a session not relevant to the question. I'm considering booking a session, but you are booked up for 2 months. I am a support worker. I get a rota every 4 weeks with shifts at different times. This makes it difficult to book a session because I don't know when I will be at work. Any chance I could book one for tomorrow? I'm off work because of illness, but still eager. I feel like I am at an important point. Wishing you well. Ian.
Hey Ian, thank you for your question. I would love to do a session with you tomorrow, but the way that I work is I can't do any more than 9 sessions a week. I cannot. It makes me ill, like physically ill. Like one day I did 5 sessions in one day. I do 3 at max in one day, but one day so happened I did 5, and the next day I woke up with flu-like symptoms, and for about 6 or 7 hours when I woke up I could barely move. I thought, like, this was the first time I realized how intensive it was, and I thought, this can't be true, this can't have such a strong effect. So I tried it a few more times, and every time I did it, it had the same effect. I seem to be an energetic teacher, so when I teach I really give everything, like all my energy and everything, to the person that I'm speaking to, and I presume it's like a healer energy, but I can't give more than a certain amount. So a lot of people ask me if I can do these extra sessions, and I just can't. But what I have done, because I've realized that sometimes people need like emergency sessions, is I'm booking less sessions each week, and then I have like a couple of emergency spots every week. But that I haven't started doing that till October. So if you write back to me in October, maybe I have some space then. Yeah, so thank you for asking about the session. I would really love to do that for you, but it just can't. It really can't. Back to the question. So what was your question? Oh, you were just talking about your past. Yeah. That's beautiful that you've spent so much time in a Zen monastery, but because there is that addiction there, I'm sure that you need to work on your psychology to an extent, and maybe in the Zen monastery they don't work on the psychology so much, they're more about being present. So there's 2 different ways which it seems that the person can practice. It's not practice to get into enlightenment, but practice to settle down the sense of self. And then ultimately there is no practice, because everything I say to you is a description of what you can do. It's not a prescription, because there isn't actually somebody inside your body, Ian, that has free will to do what I'm speaking about. But it seems as if there is. So I give up the information, it's even taken on board or it isn't. So there seems to be 2 different things that happen. So when I was a practicing Buddhist, what I was taught to do was put my attention into the present moment. It's the same as what staying in the I am or staying in consciousness is. You keep bringing your personal awareness back to the big consciousness or to this moment. So with non-duality, they talk about this consciousness being behind and looking out at everything, or that I am, the sense of being, and they say bring your attention back to that. Keep bringing it back. It's like a practice, a training. And that's one way. But if, like me, you have too many psychological issues because there were problems in childhood, so you didn't have like a very stable childhood, or there were difficulties in childhood, So if you've had that, then more than likely you have to actually look at your psychology a bit, because otherwise your unconscious is going to keep steering you in the direction of repeating what happened in your childhood. So when I was going to these ashrams, it all worked out well for me, and all these teachers, I was actually repeating looking for a father figure. Like I kept repeating looking for a father figure, and it actually worked out really well, because in that I learnt loads and had lots of awakenings. So there was this honesty and this depth there that was like committed to truth. But what was happening is that unconsciously my body was looking for a father, and it was also looking for other things. It was also looking for apologies from my parents, or recognition from my parents and from my family, like recognition about some events that happened. So what I was doing is I was meeting the father, the teacher, and then I was making the teacher a sinner, and then trying to get the teacher to apologize to me for particular sins. So that was a game that I would play out. And there's many things that you can find wrong with everybody. So if you go to, so say my first organization was this Buddhist organization, and they had this very strict rule that females weren't allowed in male areas, not all male areas, but certain male areas. And I found that very difficult emotionally to cope with, because my boyfriend lived in those areas, and I felt like it was unfair that he could come into all my space and I wasn't allowed into his space. And that this was their rule, and it was something I felt like it crossed my boundary. So it was like this Buddhist group was my father figure, was like teaching me how to live my life and how to do all these things and be. And it was like looking after and nurturing and comforting. And then I would fight against it, and I would look for them to acknowledge what my wound was, acknowledge what the problem was. And then I would get on with it, and then I would fight against it. And that's what I did with all the teachers. That's just one example. And if you're keep putting your attention into this moment, like, so you're putting your attention in this moment, and then say the main teacher comes along, you're still going to have this unconscious seeking that's happening. So you won't necessarily register it, even though you can register your body is in discomfort and you can register this moment. You won't necessarily register what's going on and what the seeking is and why you're doing that. And it seems that the witnessing of it, so the understanding of your dynamics and understanding what you're trying to do, is in some way the resolution or the end of it, or the lessening of it. So understand that often what I was doing in those situations was I was looking for recognition, looking for appreciation, looking for apologies, and it's seeing that play out, like acknowledging that. And that's something that can go on for years. Like, I'm still learning my unconscious of this body, of this makeup. So I'm still learning it. It still has unconscious playing out, and I don't think bodies ever get over that. I think they always have unconscious happening, and they always have patterns happening. But when they're really strong, then you have a really strong seeking energy and a really strong sense of self, this person that wants things in order to be happy. But as you begin to get to know yourself more, that seeking energy lessens, and then there can be this shift where you realize that who you are is home, who you are is presence. And then it's not like you have this energy anymore that's looking for freedom in getting the father figure, in getting the apology, because the freedom is right here. But there has to be almost like these two different ways of working. This one way of realizing who you are, or putting your attention back into the I am, or putting your attention back into this moment. And then the other way of getting to know what the identity is seeking for, like why the seeking is happening, why the imbalances are happening. And it's not that you have to know everything. Like, you could go at examining the unconscious forever. You could get lost in that. That could become a trap. But you have to know it to a certain extent. So it's not like really unconsciously acting out very strong patterns. So if we take somebody that's new to this subject, like they come in and they're new to this subject, and say they come to one of my retreats, that maybe what they aren't aware that they're seeking for when they're at the retreat. So rather than relaxing into retreat and enjoying what I'm saying and just really absorbed into eating lunch and doing the retreat, maybe they have this idea that they need acknowledgement from me, that they need validation, that they need praise, or that they need private time from me. So maybe that's an unconscious thing that's happening. And then maybe they play out another unconscious thing, that I'm like their mother, and they want to get into the dynamic of the mother. So maybe they had a narcissistic mother, so then they start believing that I'm doing all these narcissistic things to them, and they begin to get into that dynamic, but they have no consciousness of it. So what they're doing the whole time is creating war inside their head, and war externally as well. They might be verbally beginning to be aggressive or obnoxious, and the problem is, when that's all playing out, is when you talk about the beauty of this moment, because there's all these emotions kicking off in their system, they can't hear that. They're talking about how beautiful this is, or that this is all there is, or that this isn't a divided reality, is absolutely irrelevant to somebody that's acting out on that level. So I'm not saying that maybe their whole life, even if they become enlightened or they become free, they don't have an aversion, particular type of women, like because they had like a bad experience with their mother. But so their dynamic might be not to interact with certain types of people. So I'm not saying it totally goes away, or you're conditioning, but it gets to a point where it's just seen for what it is. It's not seen that if you get the mother to behave in a certain way, if you get that person to behave in a certain way, that you'll be free. That cannot make you free. That will never make you free. So pointing that out means that the energy can begin to let go on that. Like once you see it, so once you see that you're ramming your head in the wall, once you see that you're treating your friends like your mother, or you're treating the teacher like the mother, the energy dies in that to an extent. And it becomes less, and it becomes more an impulse in the body that's not acted out. So it becomes fed less, it's less strong, it relaxes more into itself. And then that's the cutting of the seeking, and then the cutting of the illusion. Because when it's really unconscious, you've got a you here that's really offended by that person over there. How dare they do this? And then as you begin to point backwards and say, well, what is it that you feel and think? Then this person begins to settle down. And then it maybe can begin to hear the beauty of this moment. How beautiful and wonderful this is, this moment. This is it. This is it. But if you're like in fight mode and in years of unconscious action and living out this very strong identity, how can you hear that this moment is everything? Or how can you even do the practice of putting your attention back into the I am, or presence? And then once you've got to that stage, that you're putting your attention back into presence or consciousness, and you understand non-duality and the person's relaxed, then the whole system is more relaxed, and that shift, that grace will happen. So that's not something you do, like you aren't responsible for then enlightenment. Enlightenment will happen. But this other stuff is like, you could say like a preparation, but then you've got to begin to question, like, who is it preparation for? Because there is nobody. But it's settling that system down, settling that illusion down. And then once that's settled, then you can begin to question, but who does it settle down? Who gets to enlightenment? Who is it that's going to wake up? But doing that in the very beginning is pointless to somebody that's totally convinced that I'm their mother and trying to suck off the breast. Like, I'm so cheeky sometimes in the things I say. So I would assume that Zen isn't dealing, so back to you, Ian, isn't dealing with the psychology part. and that you need to settle down that and understand why you're drinking. Addiction can be a physiological addiction, but you can stop that. It's totally possible to stop that by understanding what your triggers are and why you're getting triggered and not drinking it anymore. And it's really amazing addiction. Like I'm a big fan of tea. I'm from England and a big fan of caffeine. But this year my hormones are changing because I'm getting older, I'm getting to middle age, and I can't drink caffeine anymore. So when a woman's hormones are changing, caffeine is a nightmare for a woman. And it really amazed me. I've never really given it up in my life. I have for short periods, but never really given it up. And what really amazed me about giving it up was that once you actually get over that addiction stage, like it just goes. Like it just goes. Like I wasn't having the craving for it, but you've got to get over that addictive stage. But maybe I'm not using it in seeking ways. I wasn't using it in seeking ways, so it was very easy when I stopped. Once I stopped. But yeah, thank you for your question, Ian.